Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 125. Now, it's funny because in podcast land, we've recorded these in a different order, so I had to remember 125. So I just thought of Intercity 125, which our guest won't know what I'm talking about because he's not from around these here parts, but everyone else will know. If you're in the UK, you'll know what Intercity 125 is, and it's very topical at the moment. But anyway, yeah, James is looking at me like I'm a weirdo. This is how my head works. This is why I don't do that many intros, to be honest. But
are you wearing an anorak?
It's not an anorak. It is a gilet. I'm rocking a gilet. So I got this for Christmas off my brother, who got me a gilet about 3 or 4 years ago for my birthday, I think, which I never wore because I didn't think I could pull it off. So now that I've got two, I'm going all in, basically. So anyway, it's not about me, is it? How are you doing, Paul, seeing as you interjected me?
I'm all right. Yeah, I've been a bit quiet. I probably wasn't. I've lost track of where I was. I've left my previous studio. Had to build a new studio. I had to run the business while building the new studio, and loads of other shenanigans, which I won't go into because it'll bore everyone. But yeah, certainly been
we haven't got long enough, mate.
We haven't got long enough.
What's been going on, and we haven't got.
Needless to say, my stress levels have been fairly high. But basically getting in there at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning, the builders finishing at 12 at night every day since beginning of December almost. So just kind of and pushing builders seem to go at their own pace. So you need to be there all the time.
My brother said that once. Very quick story about this, because my brother used to do flats up and sell them and stuff like that. And there was somebody he knew got a builder around, and they had they wanted a lintel put in where they were, but they wanted the ceiling to be flat. It had like a step in it, and they wanted the ceiling to be flat. And then so they spoke to the builder. He said, okay. They went on holiday, came back. The builder had done it, engineering wise, absolutely fine, perfect flat ceiling. They went upstairs and there was a step in their bedroom. They were like, "What's that?" And he went, "Well, that's where the lintel is." And they were like, "Hang on." So yeah, you're right. You've got to be there.
Well, they stuck my water fountain in the middle of the main wall, which was going to have a huge sign in it, so you couldn't put the sign there. It's just little things like that, and also like things you need to attach to the wall. They're in the wrong place and stuff. So so there's loads of like filled in holes throughout the entire place. But we managed to open on the 3rd, which was a miracle. We still haven't got it completely finished, but it's functioning. It's safe. It's an environment which people seem to enjoy being in. So in the next week or so, it should be pretty much 100% finished once I've got additional mats and stuff like that, which over Christmas, over New Year, it's difficult to get everything delivered and on time. But
it was bad timing, wasn't it? But it is what it is, isn't it? And you've done it. So
I've done it. It exists. Yeah, and I plan to sleep at some point in 2023. So
that's cool. You can I
can catch up with that later.
You got like 11 months to get that done. That's
yeah. Well, that was, in case you don't know, that was our very, very, very special guest chiming in there with a good point, actually, because you've got 11 months to get it done, but we all know how that goes, right? Anyway, James, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, very good. Great start to the year, and training this week's been good. I've got a few elbow issues, so Paul has taken out all of the upper body stuff for me this week. So I'm on a very much abridged or abbreviated program. I'm literally squatting, deadlifting, and good mornings this week. So my training. Yeah. But it's just we just decided just to give it a 1 week totally just off. So really enjoying squatting, deadlifting, good mornings, quicker workouts, big moves. Yeah, so everything's good. Gym's good.
When your arms hurt, you just suddenly realize everything you do requires something to do with your elbow.
Well, barbell back squats as well, obviously. In this position. But it's not terrible. It's more precautionary. I'm kind of stepping back before I have to, if you know what I mean. I'm kind of, taking a bit of a break now before I have to take a break. So
listen to your body whisper before you have to hear it scream. That's
exactly,
the thing, isn't it? I love that quote, and that's a very good example you're setting there, James, for the listener community of this podcast.
I have a confession. I hadn't trained for over 3 weeks, which is the longest time in God knows how many years. I literally just couldn't. As much as I preached, you got to make time. I couldn't get it. Well, physically, I couldn't do it. I knew I would break if I tried to fit it in. I tried to walk as much as I could. I just knew I was going to break.
Your situation's slightly different, though, isn't it? Because it was like it was something that was beyond your control that just happened. So you had to try and control what you could.
Yeah.
And this is what we talk about every night. Like, you can't. Not everybody can go through stuff all the time, being in control of everything and being able to train. But it's like, if you did that for a year, that would be totally different, right? So it's one of those things. You've got it under your control now, and you've done very well at that. So that's great.
I'm back on it now. Not in anywhere near the intensity I was doing. I mean, I feel very weak in comparison, but I've started. So
excellent. Well, our guest should be able to help you with all that sort of stuff, the mindset side of it, and all of that. I think, in fact, I know that this is the third time we've had this man on here, which is fantastic. I love that. And I'm gutted because I missed the first one because I was ill. I remember that. That was one of the 2 that I've missed, I think, ever. And because I was in bed all day. But anyway, it's not about me. It's not about Paul. It's not about James. It's about our very, very, very special guest. So welcome to the Iron Tamer himself, Mr. Dave Whitley. How are you?
Doing fantastic. I am excited to be on the show. It's morning here. I know it's afternoon for you guys, and I hit the ground running today.
Yeah. You said you've been playing with the boy in the morning and everything before he goes to school, and it's great, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. So, basically, if I can't remember the numbers of the episodes that you've been on 2 previously. So if people haven't listened to those, we always, like, whenever we've got guests on again, we always send them back to those. So if you don't know who Dave is, where have you been, for a start? But if you still don't know who he is, go back and listen to those episodes, and you'll hear some of his origin stories and stuff like that. And James, we've just talked about the film of The Incredible Hulk with Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby and all that is on Netflix at the minute, apparently. So we're all excited about that. But so if you don't know who he is, go back and listen to those. And then what
can I just say, Pete, just to interrupt you, it's episode 43 and episode 76.
There you go. 43 and 76. Look at that. Jim.
Like having Carol Vorderman.
Yeah. I'm not,
I've knocked you off your back.
Not things coming to my head that I can say there, but I'm not going to. People won't know who Carol Vorderman is either, but there you go.
We do local jokes here.
Yeah. Anyway, so Dave's got a whole load of new, like, I don't know if it's a new direction you've gone in, but you've got a whole, like, new program you want to talk about and everything. So yeah, it's over to you, Dave. Where do you want to start?
Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. Thanks for having me on. And I'm very happy to talk to you guys. I love doing this show. Sometimes I do podcasts and I'm like, okay, that was okay. But like with you guys, whenever I get done with one, I'm always like, that was really good. I enjoy talking to those guys. And, it makes me feel like I'm back over there, even though I haven't been across the ocean in several years now. But I do love, I love every place I've ever been in Europe, really. So this is like, it makes me feel good to be able to talk to people who sound the way that you guys talk when you talk. So I appreciate it.
I mean, sort of like posh, like the royal family.
Yeah, totally posh. Definitely. Yeah, because when I think of you 3 guys, that's the first thought that comes into mind. They're very posh.
Obviously.
Well, they're all balding.
King Charles is going to be rocking a gilet soon after he listens to this.
Yeah. Tell Charlie I said, hey, what's up? But yeah, I without having to like go back and rehash where I come from and who I am and all that sort of stuff. For people who know, then you know. And if you don't know, I grew up I'm from Tennessee in the United States, and I grew up a chubby, overweight, kind of weak kid with a terrible stutter, and got picked on and bullied a lot. really got fascinated with the idea of superhuman powers. The Incredible Hulk TV show that we were talking about just a moment ago was a moment in my life that I am still looking back on and understanding the significance of how that affected me to this day. Like, I've always known it was a big part, but as I'm doing the work that I'm doing now that we're going to talk about on the show, I'm seeing more and more how much of an impact that TV show, specifically the premiere of that TV show, had on me. And wound up becoming a master RKC, SFG master instructor, gym owner, traveling all over the place doing kettlebell workshops and stuff. From there, it evolved into performing strongman, doing feats of strength, bending steel, ripping decks of cards, that kind of stuff. And from that, I started really looking at how the mental aspects of training as a strongman, visualization, mental rehearsal, confidence, that sort of stuff could be applied to other areas, because I saw that I was getting stronger. I saw that there were a lot of other guys that were strong, that were practicing the same sorts of stuff that I was practicing myself. And I thought, how can I apply this to other areas of my life? So I started doing similar things with my business and with my relationships, and all of those things improved in much the same way. And I thought, okay, if it's working for me, it's going to work for other people too. Let's test it out. Worked on it with my clients. And the shortest version of this is I wound up writing a book and developing a program that I called Superhuman You, that was and still is centered around helping people with goal achievement and getting their mind to line up with the person they want to become. Because everything starts with a thought. Everything starts in the imagination. You have to visualize it. You have to see it in your mind before you can make it a physical reality. And that's true of everything. Like, if you look around the room, everything that you can lay your eyes on, from your computer to your microphone to the house that you're in, whatever it is, someone had to come up with that idea and see it in their mind before it could be physically constructed. And that's just like a fundamental principle of the universe, that everything exists as thought before it exists as something in the 3D reality. I thought, okay, how can I apply that to business and relationships, and had some success with that. And that brings us to the point that we're at right now, which started a little over 4 years ago, or actually about 5.5 years ago, really, when my wife and I decided that we wanted to have a child. We went through a great deal of difficulty getting to the point of a successful pregnancy and a birth. It was not an easy process, and we had to seek out a lot of help, and we're very grateful for that. But now we have this beautiful boy. He's 4 years old, and in the process of all of that, doing my own self-development, helping other people with self-development stuff, I was working with some dads, and it got me really thinking about how the mind operates, specifically how it operates early developmentally for children. And I'm not an expert on child development or child psychology or anything like that. So if you're going to look at what I say from that point of view, I have no idea what is recommended or talked about in most of those fields, most of those processes. I'm not expert on it. I'm not even very knowledgeable about it. But what I am expert on is my son. And what I am expert on is his development, and how my wife and I deliberately and intentionally sat down before he was even born and started plotting out what we wanted to instill in him. And so it's like, we give him these tools, and we give him this education of the kind of person we want him to be. And we do that with the hopes that he's going to evolve into a wonderful human being. And so far it's working. I mean, he's a little over 4 years old now, and he's a phenomenal little boy. And I know that everyone thinks that their kid is the greatest kid in the world, and that's good. My experience with that is that I could not possibly imagine all of the joy and all of the details and all of the fun and all of the growth and development that goes into it before I was in the experience of being a dad. And so everything that I'm doing right now has come to the point of, I want to help other dads who are physically active and doing well with their health, and kind of have gotten themselves together in that area. And most of the guys that I work with are either entrepreneurial or business minded, and they've gotten themselves together in that area. But then they look at their lives, and they look at their kids, and they look at that, and they're like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing in this area. Well, there's a clue here that if you can be successful in the areas of your health and fitness, you can be successful in the areas of your business and your finance. There are things that overlap. There are things that work universally for the development and the empowerment and the advancement of anything that you do. So I've taken that and I've sort of codified it into this idea that I call the Advancing Man Project. And that name comes from a book, The Science of Getting Rich, that was written by Wallace Wattles and was published back in, I think, 1910. There's a chapter in there called The Advancing Man, and he talks about living the advancing life. And the short version of that story is that, or of that definition, is that if I'm advancing, I am consciously and intentionally looking to improve myself in some way all the time. And I am consciously and intentionally looking to help other people have a better experience in every interaction that I have with them. And so when I look back on my life, I realized there were several key moments that happened that caused me to shift and to think about things differently. And so being able to take those things from my own experience and help other guys to have a similar experience to get on the track they want to be, it has become my driving force, my primary focus in everything that I'm doing. So the Advancing Man Project is what we're talking about today.
And I suppose, although you are obviously a man and your experience is your personal experience, and you are going to be talking to men, some of the stuff that you are talking about is universal, isn't it? I mean, you will be helping men, it sounds like, through fatherhood and being more present, being more intentional with the way that they operate within a family. But I suppose that the principles are universal and I'm just thinking for the listeners who are not men, the principles that you're talking about are universal, are they?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. This
yeah.
is a human experience. I've just narrowed it down because I can speak from my own experience about being a man. I cannot speak to the experience of being a woman with any sort of authority.
Yeah. But what's fascinating is because I noticed this, and I know Paul is a father as well, and Pete is a father to a spaniel.
Who's the best spaniel in the world?
Who's the best?
Everyone thinks yeah.
But it is. I think that what you've tapped into and what you're talking about is something that we almost, as humans, I suppose, we give a lot of thought to, like you mentioned, when you have maybe your health and your training sort of down and you're on top of that, but we accept that we kind of need help, or many people accept that they need help and coaching around that element of life, and that they succeed or they get on the right path. With business, we put a lot of intentional thought into that, but with being a parent, it's almost kind of accepted that you should almost just know what you're doing. And no, you never have any training, do you, at all? It's the most important job. You mentioned, I think, on the last podcast we did, or one of the recent ones, Pete, that about people saying, oh, well, I'm just a mum. And then I remember you saying that, it's such an important job, but no, we don't actually ever get any training in how to be a good father or a good,
other than your own parents.
Yeah. So role model, but then again, if you role model, you haven't necessarily got good role models in your parents or one of your parents or whatever, So if it's just learning from how you I know that maybe this is something we're going to touch on, Dave, isn't it? This kind of generational, I don't know. You talk to me. I know what I'm trying to say, but I can't quite say it.
Is what you're trying to say. So I can think about this with my parents, who, my dad died 19 years ago this month, actually. But so he was only 65. But they got married in 1965. They'd been married a long time. I think it was like coming up to 30 years when he died. But their relationship wasn't that great. They brought up me and my brother. But I wouldn't, if I haven't got any kids, but if I did, I would not want to bring them up the same way we were brought up, because we were brought up, and it was the 80s and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, the kind of foods we used to eat weren't rubbish, but it was very limited. You know, we never had peppers, we never had pizza, we didn't eat garlic, we didn't eat this, like everything was meat and 3 veg, and that was it, and things like that. So my upbringing, I wouldn't want to put that onto someone else, if you know what I mean. So that generational stuff, and then there was also like lots of other things that happened emotionally and physically and stuff to at least one member of my family, but that then gets passed down, and I've had to deal with that in myself.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't want to pass that on to a kid, which is one of the reasons why I haven't got kids, to be honest, because when I was younger, I didn't want to, because I was like, I'm going to pass this on and I don't want to be responsible for that. But I'm not that person anymore. But anyway, it's not about me, but that's kind of, I think that's what you're trying to kind of say.
That's what I was, that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
I mean, if the only kind of manual you've got, if you like, for doing this stuff is your own personal experience and the way that you were brought up, you've got kind of a 50-50 chance of having a positive experience or a negative experience, then passing that on, haven't you?
And you'll subconsciously stumble into bringing up your kids the way you were brought up. Yeah. So.
Yeah, 100%. You guys are actually doing my job for me.
Anyway, thanks for listening.
Good night, Cleveland. Yeah, no, that's exactly spot on with it, what you guys are saying, because if we as adults in this day and age decide that we want to, if we look in the mirror, or we look at, you know, we go to the doctor and have a checkup about our health, and we look at the present results and we don't like what we see, we decide we want to make a change with that. We go seek out information. The really wise people will hire someone to help them with that, not because they can't figure it out on their own, but because hiring someone who's walked the path and has a proven track record greatly reduces the amount of time that it takes. It greatly reduces the number of mistakes that you will wind up making, and it greatly accelerates the certainty of getting the result, right? Like if you want to get stronger, talk to Paul McElroy, because he is among the best of the best in not just in the world now, but like, in my opinion, of human history, in helping people to get stronger and to transform their bodies. No doubt about it. You know, that's why you see results in the Amazing 12 program, that if you look at other people who are trying to get those results, it takes them 2 or 3 years, you know? So that speed and that certainty is why you go to someone like Paul for that. If you're going to start your own business, you don't just start making something and then hope someone shows up to buy it, you know, or you don't start doing a service and hope someone hires you. If you're smart, you research it, you find out what people actually want and need, and then you find someone who can help you get there quickly and certainly, right? That's the whole role of coaching in painting with broad strokes again. But then a very natural part of the human experience is to find a mate and have children. You know, lots and lots and lots of people do that. Otherwise, none of us would be here, right? But you go and you have this child, and here's your baby. They hand it to you, and you're like, "What the hell?" You know, like I don't know what to do here. And you know, people can seek out coaching, people can seek out information, but hardwired into us is the experience that we had growing up. You know, and so. A lot of the guys that I work with come from a background of being what I would call normal, you know, in terms of their health and fitness, in terms of their money. And so they show up and they do what they've been taught, what's been modeled for them as children, and they get dissatisfied with that result, and they decide, okay, I'm going to go find a better way to get stronger and be more fit and enjoy my life more and enjoy the use of this wonderful body that I have more. Or they decide that I want to improve my financial status, and I'm not getting what I want working this job, and I've, you know, leveled out at what I'm going to be able to do here. What's something new, something different that I can do that will provide service for people? And then go and they find a coach and they set things up and they change the trajectory of their lives there, right? A lot of the guys that I work with are the first person in their family to be wealthy or successful and rise above poverty, or that blue collar, get a good job and work hard makes you successful kind of work ethic, right? I come from that. I come from a place of believing that money was something that was limited. It was a necessary evil. And that was combined with a very, well, to the point of it being limited. Like, here's an example of that I never realized, but this was just a common type of occurrence. Several years ago, maybe between 15 and 20 years ago, I had an uncle pass away, and both of my parents were still living at the time. And we went to the funeral, and my parents were both from Georgia, which is in the southern part of the United States. And so, you know, culturally, funerals happen differently in different parts of the world. So for you guys over there, I'm not sure exactly how this plays out, but for where my parents grew up, they would get together, they would have in this funeral home, like church pew type situation, and the casket sitting up front. A preacher would come out and say some words and do like a little, you know, end of life religious ceremony type thing with that. And then everyone gets up and walks by, and some people call it viewing the body. Some people call it paying final respects or saying goodbye. You walk past the casket one last time before it's closed forever and taken to the cemetery and put in the ground. This part comes up, and my row gets up to walk up, and my mom stands up and starts to walk, and she takes 2 or 3 steps, and she stops kind of frantically and turns and looks back and reaches over and grabs her purse. She had left her purse sitting on the church pew, grabbed it, put it over her shoulder, and was holding onto it like this, like she always did. Walked up, we did, you know, the whole thing, came, sat back down, and I leaned over to her and I said, why did you stop and go back and get your purse like that? And she said, well, I didn't want anybody to take it while we were up there. And it sounds ridiculous to say it out loud, but like, it was at that moment, like it's a switch flip for me. I'm like, she thinks that everything is limited. She thinks that if you don't really, really hold on tight to what you already have, someone will come and take it from you, even to the point that we're with a bunch of extended family. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe she knew how the extended family was, right? But I started thinking back over my life and realized that's how she was with anything to do with money ever. And so I grew up in that, and no amount of sitting around thinking about what it would be like to have an unlimited supply. That wasn't even something I could compute growing up, right? And then we put that together with the Southern blue collar strong work ethic of like, the way to succeed is to go get a good job and work really hard for someone else, save and save and save and save and save, and hope nobody steals your stuff, right? And, you know, after going into business for myself, realizing that trading your time for money is the most ineffective way to build any sort of wealth, I'm like, what other areas growing up was I just given false information, not because my parents were being malicious, but because they didn't know any better. They inherited it. And I call that a generational cycle. It's just something that's passed on from one to the next, to the next, to the next. It's like what you were talking about earlier, Peter. You can look back and see that as an adult and think, okay, I don't want to be that way anymore. And you can make a change on it. But it can seem very, very daunting to do that, right? Because like a lot of the guys that I work with, like I said, they're the first person to get their stuff together in terms of money and in terms of taking care of their health. They are the first person to realize that they're walking around with this. And I call that sort of internal guidance system, your internal code, right? It's all of your beliefs. It's all of the concepts by which you live. It's like your operating system, right? And so like there's 3 different definitions of code that I use. If I can go into teaching mode here for a moment, there is the secret language aspect of it, right? And what that means is, for example, if the 4 of us start sitting around and we start talking about training, and I throw out the word snatch, we are all immediately going to think of lifting a weight overhead in one uninterrupted motion, because that's what snatch means in this context. But in the States, snatch also means it's a euphemism for female genitals, right?
See him over here?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to, overstep my knowledge of culture, right? So that's another definition of snatch. Another definition of snatch is you have something and I grab it out of your hand. I snatched it up from you, right? So depending on the context, we will use that word differently. So if we're sitting around talking about training, we talk about snatches, we're talking in code to the outside listener, right? And I remember when I first got into kettlebell stuff and we're talking about snatches and jerking, snatch and jerk, snatch and jerk. I'm like, this is funny, so there's that aspect of it. It's the secret language, or the way that we communicate that other people outside don't understand. Well, that extends inward, which is a strange way to put it, but we have conversations with ourselves constantly. We are constantly talking back and forth with our own internal dialogue, inner conversation. And sometimes I'll refer to that as a mental diet. What am I feeding my mind with my mental diet? And so that internal code is how I'm talking to myself, which always takes me back to the question of, if you knew someone who spoke to you about you the way that you speak to yourself about yourself, is that person on your side or are they against you? Because if you are speaking to yourself about yourself in such a way that it's disparaging and it's discouraging and you're beating yourself up, you are literally impeding your own progress and in your own way. So there's that aspect of the code. Second part, or the second, and these are in no particular order, is like a computer code. It's an operating system, right? So if something is programmed in a particular way with a particular kind of code, you do an input, it runs through that code and you get an output. And the only way to change the output is to either change the input or change the code through which it goes. So that's the second part of the internal code. And that's how we navigate the world. That's how we navigate our human existence. And then the third part is from the literal root word in Latin of codex, is translated literally as a book of laws. So it's my personal code of conduct. It's my code of ethics. It's how I live my life. And the issue that we run into is very often we will say that we want to live one way and we will exhibit living in a different way. And so we have these conflicting beliefs and we wonder why there's, conflict in the world outside of us, but it's because it all originates within. And we can straighten that out within ourselves, or we can just accept that that's the way we are. But then when it comes to our children, we have to understand that do as I say, not as I do, does not, has not, and will not ever work. That's just not a thing that works. And so what children learn from is what they witness, what they experience, and what they absorb. And really the only difference in the way that they're navigating their experience at a very young age is their vocabulary. They don't know how to describe what's going on in certain ways, and their experience. This is a new thing to them, right? So they've never tied their shoes before. They don't even know what that means. Once they learn how to do it, it's in there. It's part of their operating system, part of their internal code. Like, do any of you guys remember the moment that you successfully tied your shoes for the first time? No, but it's in there, and we know it because we can look at your life and see the result there. And that's a very fractional example of how the whole internal code thing works. And we inherit that. And that's why I call it generational cycles, right? And specifically what I'm addressing with guys is I want to address unwanted generational cycles, break those and replace them with things that serve them, that they want, and also take the ones that they already have that do serve them and strengthen them. Mm-hmm. So the guys that I've been working with as far as fathers are, they haven't figured out how to apply the mindset aspect that they've used successfully in other areas like finances and health and fitness to being a dad, because we are so immersed in that family culture and then the community culture and then the world culture of what a dad is, that we don't really think about it very much, right? We think that it is something that we're trying to get our kid to do, is how we are imparting things onto them. We're trying to get them to do things, or get them to act a certain way, or get them to think a certain way, or get them to be a certain way, when really we can't teach them nearly as much that way as we can by just living who we want them to be. The guys that I work with are plagued by this underlying fear of failing as a father. They fear that whatever they do is going to have some sort of negative impact on their children. They maybe they were brought up with a tough love kind of thing where they would get a spanking if they made a mistake, or they would get punished. But they look back and realize that that was just abuse disguised as discipline, you know, and they don't want to be that way. Or maybe they weren't physically punished, but they were suffered emotional issues that way. Like, for example, I was at the park with my son a few months ago. We were there playing and carrying on, and there was another guy that showed up. He had two kids with him, a girl and a boy. The boy was younger. The girl was probably 10. The boy was probably 7 or 8 years old. Just guessing on that. Maybe even younger than that. And the boy did something that the father didn't want him to do. I don't even remember what it was. And the father yelled at him and told him to stop. Like, that was his default. It's like, the kid did something I don't want him to do. My immediate thing is to get in his face and yell at him. This happened 2 or 3 times because the kid kept going with it. And finally, the father was like, okay, get in the truck, we're leaving. And the kid, realizing that the dad was serious, is like, why? I'm sorry. I won't do it anymore. So it's no. And this guy looks at this son, this kid, and he just looks at him, yells at him, you never fucking listen. We're leaving now. Get in the goddamn truck. And the little girl, she sees what's happening. She's in the truck already. And he sees me. He knows I'm there. And I'm like, if this is what he does when he knows someone else is watching, what's going on in the house? You know, the kid, to his credit, or playing out the role that he's being taught, stands and crosses his arms and just looks at his dad defiantly and doesn't move. The guy gets in the truck and drives away, drives around a corner, past a building, out of view of the kid. And the kid freaks out and loses his mind and takes off chasing the truck, right? And I look over at my son, who is visibly shaken by this. And he looks at me and he says, Daddy, we have to help that boy. And I'm like, you're right, we do. And so I pick him up and I'm going to go get the child and tell him he's okay. He runs around the corner of the building. And by the time we get up there, the exit of the park's obscured by the building. By the time we get up there, I can see that the truck is now out at the main road and is turning and driving away. The little boy's nowhere to be seen. My son is like, where's the little boy? Did his daddy leave him behind? We have to help him. And I'm like, no, kid, I am confident that he got in the truck, that his daddy didn't leave him behind. But how do we know, Daddy? How do we know? We have to help him. And this is making me get choked up just talking about it, right? That's my son's response to this. Well, it just so happened that there was a couple that was walking a dog that was coming. And I said, hey, did you guys see that truck that just left? And they said, yeah. I said, did a little boy get in the truck? He says, yeah, the dad was really angry, but the little boy got in the truck. And I said, see, Liam, you know, he's going home. He didn't get left behind. And so it took my son a little while to kind of get through that and to understand that. And, you know, knowing what I know from studying the process of what I wanted to do with my son, and I've talked about fear before in other shows and like other contexts. Children are born and they're only afraid. All of us, we're born with exactly 2 fears, 2, and that's all. Those are fear of loud noises and fear of falling or being dropped. Everything else is a learned behavior, right? And so if we can learn it, we can unlearn it, right? But if we look at developmentally what's going on there, as a child gets a little bit older and becomes more self-aware, the biggest fear that a child that age has is being abandoned, being left alone. And so this guy's way of instructing his child to obey and do what I tell you to do is with the threat of abandonment. And so that kind of thing just really hits me hard, right? And this guy obviously learned that from somewhere. And I talked to some people about it without giving the context of that I have in this show. And some people are like, that's terrible. That's awful. I can't imagine that. And some people are like, well, good for him. The kid needed to learn a lesson. And I'm like, really? Is that really how you want to be? And so when I talk to guys with these fears of messing up their children, they come from places like that little boy. And because of that, they're full of this conflicted belief and with being inconsistent on how they're interacting with their kids. They don't know how to establish boundaries. They are concerned that they're going to either let them get away with too much or that they're going to be too hard on them. And they're just terrified of one guy actually told me that his biggest fear was that when his son grows up, he won't want to have anything to do with me anymore because of some huge mistake that I've made. And if anyone's ever learned anything from what I talk about, it's that what we think about, we tend to bring into our lives. And so if I'm walking around constantly with a fear that I'm messing my son up, then that tends to be how it plays out, right? But the really good thing about that is, though, is that once we understand how the mind works, we can go in and we can analyze that internal code that we're operating with and look at it and say, okay, does this particular belief that I have line up with who I want to be? And if it does, awesome. Let's feed it and grow it and make more of it. And if it doesn't, we need to break it and we need to replace it with something, because you can't just break it and throw it away. It's like someone cleaning up their diet. If they're, eating a steady diet of junk food and they just stop eating all that and don't replace it with something that's going to nourish their body, then what's going to happen, right? They're just going to revert. They have to understand that anything like that we break and get rid of, we have to replace it with something that serves us. And so that is the full purpose of what I'm doing with this, is helping guys, first of all, recognize that the way that they were brought up isn't the way that their children have to be brought up. If a guy sees himself turning into his upbringing against his will, we address that in the internal code. And if I can tell another story about a client, this was a pivotal moment. I had a client that I was working with, and we were working on specifically mental rehearsal and visualization stuff related to business and money affairs, right? And he was very much in the entrepreneurial hustle and grind 24/7. That's how I measure my success. And we realized later on that he had sort of picked up from his upbringing the idea of a father is a provider. And that's true. A parent is a provider, but the absent provider, the one who's always at work, and that's how I'm showing you love, is by not being there and making sure that you have all your needs met, is where he was coming from. But this guy, he had promised his son, who was, I think, 5, 6 years old at the time, that he was going to go to a soccer game, or a football game, as you would call it over there, right? And so he's getting ready to get up and leave the office, and he gets an email of some emergency of some sort. He never really even told me what it was about, but he noticed it, and it triggered that hustle and grind thing. He's like, well, I've got time. This will only take a couple of minutes. I can fix this. I can deal with whatever this emergency is. And 20 or 30 minutes later, the issue's not resolved. He's still not out the door. He notices what time it is, and so he realizes he's not going to make it to the game. He doesn't have time now. And so he calls his wife to tell his son and apologize to his son, which he had never done before. So to his credit, he's moving in the direction he wanted to go, but he wasn't really consciously aware of it at this point. And he gets on the phone with his son and he says, I'm really sorry, buddy. I'm not going to be able to make it to the game. Something came up at work that I have to finish, and I'm running late now. And the son, on FaceTime, looks him in the eye and just very pleasantly, these are his words, very pleasantly and understandingly replies back, that's okay, Daddy. You don't ever come to my games. I'm used to it. Hands the phone off to mom and goes on about his business doing fun kid stuff. And the guy was absolutely gutted over this, obviously, right? Because this is who his son believes him to be, is the guy who never shows up for anything. And so he's like, Dave, I need help with this. I don't understand. And I said, well, where do you think it comes from? And he's like, I realize that that's exactly the way my father was. How do I deal with this? How do I stop this and still be successful at my business? That was his balancing act, right? That was the thing that he didn't know how to do. How could he achieve the success that he wanted in both areas equally? And so we started working on his internal code and rewriting it and breaking things that didn't serve him and replacing them with things that do. And now he has this wonderful relationship with his son. And like I've had things like that happen too, where I know that I have done something that would be disappointing to my son, and he actually has a different reaction. He's like, "Oh, that's no big deal. You always do that." And I'm like, "I need to go and address this," right? So it's a work in
Well, I
progress.
suppose the thing is that a lot of these things are people deal with their health and fitness. But I mean, are these guys that you're talking to, is there just something that triggers it? I mean, like we always say with health and fitness, you have to make a decision, because a lot of people want to change.
Mhm.
There's a difference between wanting and deciding, isn't there? So
Absolutely.
I mean, it
Absolutely.
sounds like, I mean, sometimes a kind of catastrophic event can cause change, but sometimes a catastrophic event can just continue. Someone continues doing what they're doing. You know, you have a heart attack, you wake up the next day and have a cigarette. You know, it's like, what has to happen? But I mean, when you're working with someone on this, I mean, are you asking them some questions? Are you almost trying to talk them out of it? Or are you trying to pre-qualify? I mean, how do you know this person's serious about actually wanting to change? Because if they've grown up with it, then it, you know, it's kind of what did Hardy say? Character is fate. You know. You know, so it's like, it's quite easy for a lot of people to just be that person. It's very difficult to turn the ship, you know. So what are you doing to ensure that the person shows up and they're actually willing to change, not just say it?
That's a fantastic question. You're right about the decision aspect of it. Typically, something has happened where they've become aware of a shortcoming that and this is the big thing. They want it to end with them and not be passed on to their children, right? And so where we start there is, do you, as you said, do you want to, or have you made the decision to? And we get very clear. The very first step on everything that I do is clarity, because borrowing the quote from Tony Blauer again, is the clarity we define something, or the clarity with which we define something determines its usefulness to us, right? So how clear are you on what you perceive a father to be? Because the role models that we have are men from our childhood, media from our childhood, current media, and just examples that we have. And, you know, we very often see dads being portrayed as the absent provider that we talked about, as the stern disciplinarian, which is the guy in the truck. He thinks he's doing a tough love service there, right? Or quite frequently in media, we see it as just a bumbling idiot. Like, can you think of a sitcom that doesn't have the father is just this bumbling idiot? Like, and the apex predator of that, the apex predator of that is Homer Simpson, right? He's just a complete idiot.
I suppose my question then is what do you see the role of a father to be now, or even more deeply, a man? You know, we're in a very our society at the moment is really wrestling with these questions and the role of what it is to grow up. You see, one of the things about, I've got two boys, and you know, boys are, I mean, no, we all know men have historically been in the position of being the providers, being decision makers, etc. And we live in a modern society where that has changed, and we have a much different landscape for intellect, a much different landscape in terms of parenting. But we're still biological creatures. But I'm just wondering what you see the role of a man being and therefore a father as an extension of that.
For me, in my personal approach on it, the reason that I arrived at the name Advancing Man Project is goes back to the book Science of Getting Rich, like I talked about earlier. When we realized, my wife and I realized that we were going to have a child, that our efforts in doing that were going to be successful, and she was pregnant before he was ever even born, I started thinking about how I wanted him to be and what I wanted to instill in him so that he could live a good life and not, you know, repeat my mistakes, and not repeat other blunders that I had overcome. And so I thought, the way that I typically do this is to get is to get a lot of clarity on it, right? And to get very clear, because without clarity, you don't know where you're going. You don't know how you're going to get there. You don't know if you're already there, and you're just kind of forever reactive and inconsistent with everything. Just, the ship being blown around at sea without a pilot. But once you establish some clarity and realize that there is an internal code, an operating system, a secret language that we use within ourselves, and it's our book of the law by which we live. And it's there, it's already there, and it's in play, and there's no off switch for it. So when we can accept that and understand that subconsciously that's where our behaviors are coming from, now we can go in and look at what do my external results show that I really believe? Not what am I saying that I believe, but what do I really believe, right? And once we get that established, then you know where you're going. You can decide the fastest and most certain way to get there, and you plan in advance how to respond to external circumstances rather than react to them. So that's at the foundation of any sort of change. But specifically as it relates to being a father, the point that I arrived at when my wife was pregnant and we knew that this was going to happen, is I sat down and just wrote down qualities that I wanted to see in my son. And as I wrote them, I'm like, these are great. This is awesome stuff. And I sort of sat it off to the side and went on about my business, came back and revisited it later and picked it up and read the list. And I'm like, I'm not up to task on like half of this stuff. I'm falling short on a lot of the stuff that I want for him. What's he going to do when he sees me being that way? I thought, well, the way to influence him is to be the man that I want to be, and hope that he will learn from that, model that, and advance towards that. So if I could distill it all down to a single phrase, the decision that I made there was that in every interaction that I have with him, I'm approaching it with the intention of helping him be better off than he was before that interaction. If every single tiny interaction or large interaction that I'm having with him, can I find a way to help him grow as a person, to help him understand himself or the world better, to help him just be in a better position than he was before that interaction, then everything else after that will just be details and commentary. If I can do that part, show up with that intention, even though I'm human, even though I'm fallible, even though I make mistakes, if the intention behind it is to help make sure that he's better because of an interaction that we just had, and that's my guiding principle. Even if I make a mistake, which I do, it's okay, because together we can learn from that mistake. When I say that, it sounds like I'm saying I just have to show up and be positive for him all the time. And that's not really what it is. For example, I lost my dad in 2020 and went through a grieving process with that, and was very open about it with him. Explained to him that his grandpa had died, and that it was my daddy and I was never going to get to see him again, and explained like sadness to him and grief. And as best he could understand it, he caught on to it. Right. And then my dad's birthday is in December. So last month when his birthday rolled around, I typically, I have a knack for remembering birthdays and anniversaries of particular things, and dates stick in my mind like that. So my dad's birthday rolls around, and I'm kind of, feeling that and being nostalgic and being grateful, but also being sad. And my son looks at me, very, very perceptive of me, says, why does your face look like that? And, I was like right on the verge of crying. So he knew that I was sad. I said, what do you mean, buddy? He says, your face looks like you're sad. Why does your face look like that? And so I talked to him about it, and I started crying, and he was doing what he could to console me, not like to a huge degree of like, oh, daddy, here, don't cry, I hope you feel better. He's like, oh, and you're sad because of that? And I'm like, yeah. And you know what it feels like to be sad, right? And he says, yeah, I understand, daddy. And so what I did there is I modeled a healthy expression of grief, a healthy expression of emotion, because, you know, as men, there's still very much, it's not as much as it was when I was a kid or when we were kids, but there's still very much an expectation. Boys don't cry. If you cry, you're acting like a little girl, you know, quit crying like a little bitch, that kind of stuff. And it still permeates man culture. And I don't want my son to grow up suppressing his emotions and dealing with any sort of internal conflict that would propagate. So there's an example of it not being easy, and it not being pleasant, and it not being necessarily a happy, positive interaction with him. And so also, like, anytime that I do something, make a mistake, I own it and I apologize to him. And one of the things that I say to him, I don't say it every single day, but when most days, I'd say 5 or 6 days out of the week, when I'm with him before he goes to bed, I say, son, is there anything at all that happened today that you feel like I need to apologize to you for, where I was not kind to you, or I was harsh with you or anything like that? And usually the answer is no. But sometimes if it's something like he wanted to do something and there was a boundary there, and I'm like, no, we're done watching TV for the day, we're going to go outside and play, and he is disappointed because of that, he might bring something like that up. But just knowing that I'm going to end my day asking him that helps me stay on track with the concept of every interaction I have with him, I want it to result in him being better in some way. So once that's established, everything else becomes a matter of how does what I'm doing and saying and modeling for him fit through that filter.
One thing that sorry, go on, Pete.
I was about to say, I've written down so much here, because this all resonates, because this is stuff I've been looking at myself, for myself. But one thing you just said right at the end of that is being the person who you want, you know. So you wrote down all these things and you're like, this is who I want my son to be, but I'm not all of these things. I fall short on a lot of these things. And I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people out there, not necessarily just mums and dads, but would go out and say, right, here's what I didn't have and who I'm not. So I'm going to go out and work as hard as I can so my son or daughter has everything that I didn't have, but then becomes the absent parent because of that. Rather than, so you're flipping it the other way and saying it doesn't matter what I had and what I didn't have. I've got to become the person who my son or daughter is to become, or I want them to become. But then, and there was something you said earlier as well, and this comes from this, but the ultimate human arrogance is to believe that you're in control of anything, right? Because we're not, because things just happen around you. Your perception of how things happen are, you can change. So the whole world doesn't change, your perception changes. So the ultimate human arrogance is to think, this is who I want my son or daughter to be. I'm going to do all these things, and then they're off to go into the world, and that's who they are going to be. It doesn't necessarily work out like that, does it? But there's more of a chance, obviously, if you as the role model live in it, but it makes you a better person. Well, it makes you the person you want to be as well, I think. This is what I'm getting from it anyway, and I'll stop talking now because I could go on forever. But that's what I've just got from the very last bit of what you said there anyway.
Yeah, that's a very good summary and observation of the whole point. So yes, absolutely. The fact is, we were talking about Lou Ferrigno and the Hulk earlier. Looking back on that moment for me when I was a kid, looking back on it now from the work that I've been doing with this particular project, I realized that there were aspects of my life where neither one of my parents and no one around me was providing something that I needed or that I wanted. I was looking for a hero, and kids are going to have heroes. They have to. They have role models. They have people they look up to. They have people who are going to influence how they develop and how they unfold. And fortunately for me, my fascination with the Hulk led me to Lou Ferrigno, led me to awareness of strength and health and fitness. Despite the fact that bodybuilding then and now is not necessarily a healthy endeavor at the professional level, but no pro sport is a healthy activity, right? If we're looking at taking the human body to the limits of what it can do under a given set of parameters, it's by definition, it has to be out of balance for it to be excellent. It has to be. I didn't want to be that way as a dad. And looking back, realizing that I needed a role model, I needed a hero in that area of my life. And I identified with the Hulk and chose Lou Ferrigno, or however you want to put that, as the catalyst that started me literally on the journey of strength and health that has been part of my life for over 40 years now. Kids are going to find a hero, and they need it. They have to have it. There's no escaping that. The only question then becomes, is it going to be you that is your child's number one hero? Or is it going to be some dumbass on TikTok who's, drinking hot sauce or, trying to light farts on fire or something, right?
We've got that with Andrew Tate at the moment, haven't we? Whereas also,
totally, yeah.
Men, there's a whole kind of subset of men or young or teenagers who perhaps don't have a male role model, and in there is as you say, the TikTok kind of influences in there. Some good, some not so good. Some
right.
They all say something that's of the truth, because no one's completely telling lies. So whether you like Andrew Tate or not, he is someone who is obviously capturing the minds of people, because he is addressing questions that they're asking, and whether he's giving the right answers is not for me to say, because I don't know a huge amount about what he says, but I do know that he is influencing particularly young boys, because they don't have that role model, and as you say, if maybe they don't have it at home and they're seeking elsewhere, and you so happen to find in the limited kind of entertainment landscape of our childhoods versus now, where, I mean, if you want something, you can find it online, can't you?
Yeah, within seconds.
Good or bad.
Yeah. I mean, like, to put in perspective what you said, when I decided I wanted to get stronger, and found out, I saw Ferrigno and Arnold and Franco and all of those guys in the movie Pumping Iron not too long after the Incredible Hulk premiered, and I saw them lifting weights, and I'm like, okay, that's how this happens. That's the stuff you have to do to get bigger and stronger, to be like those guys. Well, I got some weights, but then what do? Right? Well, now you have to know how to use them. And back then it was like on the weekend, we would go to the mall, and I could go in the bookstore and peruse different books, that the limited amount of books and magazines that were published on the subject of health and fitness, right? Contrast that with now, with a kid who's 10 years old and decides he wants to get into lifting or health or whatever. Google, bam, there's all the information in the world literally at your fingertips, and some of it is valid and some of it is not. So the pendulum has swung completely the other way. Like when we were young, the internet wasn't a thing. It was a much longer, more involved process, and even finding the information, much less implementing it, right? Or finding success stories with it, or finding failure stories with it, right? We were talking earlier about a particular nutritional approach that got Paul ruffled in his feathers.
That was me.
Okay. Yeah.
Two little dicky birds.
It was Pete. Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's something you can just go Google and find. Like how long would it have taken somebody to find that information if there was no internet and there were only bookstores?
Yeah. You've just reminded, I watched the film yesterday, and a couple of my guys told me about it. Steve Holliner, friend of the show, told James about it on Facebook. Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you haven't seen it, watch it. And that's what Google is, basically. You just said, years ago, you go into, I mean, like the film's about something completely different than what I'm about to say, but it's kind of similar. Because years ago, you'd have to go in and there'd be a few magazines written by people who know what they're talking about. Then you'd be able to find a program and all that, but you'd have to go looking. Now, everything is everywhere all at once on Google. You go and you want to know anything, and you've got everything at your fingertips. And that's what that was one of the whole reasons we started this podcast, was because we don't want to have everything. We want to have things that help. In each episode that someone listens to, will help a person, one of the listeners. It might not, but they can use the old Bruce Lee type thing of, take what works for you and disregard the rest.
Right.
And I can guarantee that in this episode, there's stuff for that's going to happen. There'll be stuff for everybody.
But I think one of the things that I think we've noticing when we're talking is that, hacks and techniques and things like that are everywhere. They're 10 a penny, and they have been for an age. But the character, in order to implement is often lacking. And often we seek the techniques, but we lack the character to implement them. And I think the big development of anyone who's successful is that they have the character to see it through. So on your programs, how are you ensuring people that? I mean, do some people start and not finish? Or are they? I mean, does everyone come with the character? Do they kind of self-selecting in that sense, or are you trying to help them establish that character to actually see through some of these things? So that once they've got the information, they actually can do it, rather than just saying, "Yeah, I know how to do it. Yeah, I'll do it."
Well, the people that I work with, I'm becoming more and more selective, because I don't want someone to show up and waste their time and mine by me saying, okay, here's this and this and this, that if you do it, it will help you. And then them come back the next week and not done any of it. Right. Or not asking for help or guidance with it like that. So I'm quite selective with who I work with. The guy who I'm working with, like if I'm painting in generalities, like, the idea of an avatar, right? He's sick of being stuck in the same old negative thoughts and conflicting beliefs and bad habits that have gotten him where he is. And he knows that there are other areas of his life that he's been able to change the way he thinks and change the way he sees himself. And then the results just naturally unfold, because he's working from he becomes a new person, and then he acts like a new person, rather than saying, I'm going to start acting in a particular way and hope that I become the person who that feels natural for. So I address everything from an internal viewpoint first. What's your internal code? How do you see yourself? What is your self-concept? What do you really believe about these things? Not what do you tell yourself that you believe, but what do you really believe, as evidenced by your actions and your results? And the big thing that people run into, every single person, is they want to say out loud and believe that they believe something that is good and beneficial. But if we look at how they actually act and what their results are, it's obvious that that's not what they really deeply embrace and believe. Their operating system is running differently. I'm trying to, drive a nail with a screwdriver sort of thing, right? And so the big pivotal moment for these guys is they're like, okay, I could live this way myself if it was just me and get along okay. But getting along okay is not good enough for my children. And so I don't want to pass this stuff on to my kids. And I know that saying, do as I say, not as I do, doesn't work. So how can I do differently for them? And the answer is, we have to be someone different first internally, even though we may not be expressing it anywhere else in our life. Once we change our identity from being that stagnant, stuck person to being what I call the advancing man, who is perpetually improving his own life and perpetually doing whatever he can do to improve not just his kids, primary focus on the kids, but to improve everyone else's life around them. How can I help other people get better today? How can I help myself get better today? And, better sort of a subjective thing, but if we're guided by that intention, each situation reveals in and of itself what getting better means within that context. There is a concept, and I don't remember where I got this from. Like I could look it up in our everything everywhere all at once world, and I can find out where the quote came from or where the idea came from. But it was I think it was some psychologist coined this phrase, this concept of what's called a transitional character. And that means that a transitional character is a single person who in the course of a single generation can do something or become someone so radically different that it alters the entire future for generations for that family. It's like it's a complete and utter disruption and change from the past leading up to me. I'm the transitional character. Everything after me changes, right? And when we think about a family tree, we think about the trunk comes up and all the branches go, and I'm over here on one branch and my children are further out on that branch or on a branch that branches off of me. But really, that is, as a visual representation, is just a little bit lacking. If we're really going to look at the family tree, I'm the trunk. I am drawing from my roots. I am my own experience. And then everything that grows forth from the trunk is a result of how well that trunk is interacting with the roots and absorbing things or not absorbing things to help the tree grow. So that transitional character is the person who comes along and says, you know what? Diabetes runs in my family. This is a personal one. Diabetes runs in my family. You know what else runs in my family? Biscuits, gravy, cake, pie, and literally using particularly sweets as a vehicle to express love and affection. Here, I made this cake for you because I love you. And that's, going back to the funeral thing we were talking about earlier, that's like a huge part of the entire Southern culture in the US. It's like if some terrible thing happens, someone has a loss, a funeral or whatever, people will bake a cake and take it to the person. Here, I made this cake for you because you're sad. And that seems like a great gesture of kindness, and the intention behind it is, but then diabetes runs in the family, right? And, of course, the flip side of that is something wonderful is happening. You had a baby. Here, I made this cake for you to celebrate, right? And so it winds up being, that's just a little sliver of it. But that kind of paradigm, that kind of thing that happens within the internal code is prevalent in areas, multiple areas of our lives all the time. And so can we identify the action versus the intention behind it? Because the intention behind it is I'm going to express love and affection and caring and compassion and empathy to you. But the actions play out in such that I'm contributing to a problem that you already have, and I'm devaluing your life.
And you're going to blame it on your genetics?
Yes.
Because it runs in the family.
Because it runs in the family. And even though diabetes did run in my family all the way up to my grandparents, and I have an aunt, my dad's sister, who has dealt with insulin issues on my mom's side, several aunts and uncles, so from both sides of the family, it's coming in. I should probably just accept that I'm doomed to that, right? But because of a decision that I made to get interested in being stronger and being more healthy, it never happened to me. And because, and this is an interesting example of how the ebb and flow happens with it. Because of my interest in that, I started talking to my parents as a very young kid about food and about nutrition. And, cheap food is almost always more processed and not as good for you, right? And so obesity is a symptom of poverty, is my belief, right? And so I'm like, all of this stuff comes around from a fear that we're not going to have enough. And so I'm going to, sack away money. I'm going to hold on to food and not waste it, right? Have to clean your plate. Don't waste food because it costs money. So you're overeating, and you're overeating on cheap shit food. And then diabetes runs in the family. And it's like, if you can start making connections like that, like what is it in my family history that is there that we've all just accepted, but it doesn't have to be that way? Can I change that? And the answer is yes, in most cases, which then sets you up to become the transitional character. And when you own that, when you own the fact that you are responsible for your internal code, it's not your fault that you were programmed in a particular way. But if you don't like it, it is your responsibility to change it. And if we have children, it is definitely our responsibility to take whatever doesn't serve us, that is not going to serve them, and find a way to break that and replace it with something that does, and help them to become an advancing person.
I love that. Call Fred Broderick, by the way. I looked it up. That was the name of the guy.
The transitional character guy?
Yes. Call Fred Broderick.
Fred Broderick. Very good. Thank you for that.
Heard of him. Never heard of him, but there you go. I'll be looking that up.
What I was going to say earlier, Dave, is I think about this sort of stuff a lot, and since I've got 2 kids, and I think when I was growing up, the example you used of sounded like quite a stark, harrowing example of the dad, kind of swearing at the young kid and then driving off without him. But I think a lot of the things that I mean, I don't know if this is the same for all of us, but I remember some really like innocuous little kind of things from when I was growing up, like just a little phrase that someone would say to you, or almost the way someone looked at you, or little, so nothing that was particularly like something of note, like a big occasion, but you just seem to remember these little interactions you may have had with people at times, or little things. That makes me really, really conscious of when I'm dealing with my kids, like, like just, you might just remember the way that you said something, and then the response that you got from a parent, or the way a parent would look at you, or the tone in their voice that they would, it's these small kind of daily things, isn't it, that I think you have to be really, really, and I just know from myself as an adult, remembering things from when you were like, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of age, and you think, well, that was just a throwaway remark or a throwaway comment, but it somehow goes in and gets stuck, doesn't it? And it's so it's not always these big gestures, or these big arguments, or these big fights. It's these little things, and then that makes me really, really aware of like you say, the kind of the way that I speak to my kids, or the way that
well, kids are searching for meaning because they're trying to understand the world. And their brains are kind of indiscriminate, aren't they? The way they search for meaning, because they're kind of geared to soak up everything as fast as possible, so they can get up and running as quickly as possible, and they can be independent. So they're just going, bang, I'll take that, I'll take that, I'll take that. And how they process it, I suppose, is
it's not just kids though, because I've been thinking about this a lot as well, about because you can get yourself into a huge spiral on this of, I said that thing to that person, or that person said that thing to me, and that stuck with me since I was 3 years old or 5 years old or whatever. And it was a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a friend or whoever. But they didn't know they'd said it. But then if you then go through your life now saying, whatever I say to my kids, I've got to be very careful, which you do, and be mindful of what you're saying, but you still might say something that sticks with them that you didn't want to. But if you beat yourself up, if you've done it with intention, then fair enough. But if you've done it
inadvertently,
and you were trying to be good, as long as you're trying to be good, it's okay. And you can't avoid it, because obviously it's the trying to control everything in the world, isn't it? You can't. It's out of your control. You can only control you. And as long as you're trying to be as good as possible and living with authenticity and being genuine, people are still going to get offended. People are still going to get hurt. People are still going to think, you've said something that's affected their lives in a particularly good way, particularly bad way, whatever it is. There's nothing you can do about it, but all you can do is try to live life as we've been taught about, as you would want to be. But there's a huge rabbit hole on that. It's massive, but it's, I think about this a lot. So, and I've taken that with me for the last few years at least, because I never used to even think about that stuff, and just used to say stuff just to wind people up as well. Then, no, but you know what I mean. But then, but that can cause real problems because you don't know what's happening in their life. So, yeah,
exactly. And there's a habitual thing that a lot of folks do, where they'll just refuse to take a compliment. I see, and I'll be like, "Hey, Peter, I really like your hat." And you're like, "Oh, this hat, it's I bought it for $1 at the flea market, it's nothing, just accept the compliment, And so it's like there's that sort of thing. Or there's one of the things that is very much in my awareness, is very much on my radar, is, and I don't know if this is a cultural thing here, if it's universal, so you guys can help me out with this as well. Very often I will see parents with kids same age as mine, a little bit older, a little bit younger, whatever. And they do this with adults as well. This is just sort of the default way of expressing this. Child does something that you don't want him to do. Could be dangerous, could be, writing on the wall with a crayon, something that's not really dangerous, but just like inconvenient, or just like socially not acceptable, or whatever, and the child would be told after they've done it, no, you can't do that. And I literally got to see this in action with my son and one of our extended family relatives. He had done something, or he had said something, actually. Well, I'll go ahead and say it. I'll go ahead and do this. He's young. To him, a finger, an ear, an elbow, and a penis are all the same, because it's just parts of his body, right? Yeah. But he thinks penis is a funny word. And so he was singing a song about wiggle my elbow, wiggle my fingers, wiggle my penis, wiggle my, and he was shut down by a relative. You can't say that. And he looks at just dead ass in the eye and goes, but I already did.
Good comeback.
And yeah, and it's not even that that's a clever comeback. It's just a statement of reality of where he is, right? And so that is a particular thing that when we were writing out this list, my wife and I were like, how are we going to communicate with this kid? And for me personally, I never ever want to tell someone, anyone, especially my son, that they can't do something, especially if they've already done it, right? So on the surface, it looks like I'm just trying to make sure that everyone stays safe and that all the rules are being followed, right? And what I really mean is, this is not allowed. Please don't do that anymore, or you might get hurt if you do that kind of thing, right? But if that's the way that is expressed, how many hundreds of thousands of times during those first 7 years or so of developmental sponge-like absorption of the brain is a child told, you can't do that, you can't do that? And how many times is being told they can't done in reference to something that they literally did? I did it, and you're telling me now that I can't do it anymore. And I'm like, what sort of effect does that have? So I actually have a couple of things that I printed out and hung on the wall by the changing table before our son was born. And it's not a changing table now, it's a dresser, right? But the stuff still hangs on the wall, and it is ways to communicate what you really mean with your child, and to help them understand and develop better, and being specific about it rather than you can't do that is on there. And another one that's like a real commonly used phrase that we rarely ever say to him is be careful. Because like kids playing on the steps, right? And just throwaway comment, be careful. Or, sometimes you might hear, be careful, you're going to fall and break your neck. Like they don't process it the same way that we do. I know that if I'm walking up and down the steps and one of you guys says, hey, there's ice on the steps, be careful, or you'll fall and break your neck, I know that you are purposefully being exaggerating with that, right? And that that's just kind of an adult communication thing. He doesn't have the vocabulary, the experience to register that. And so what he hears when he says, or when someone says, be careful, what the child hears is, I don't trust your judgment, and you're in danger, and you don't even know it, and you don't know how to deal with it. So be afraid. And I don't want to tell my son to be afraid of something that isn't there. I want him to explore it and find out, is there danger here? And if so, how do I mitigate it? Right. So I have a list of things that to say rather than be careful. And it's stuff like, did you notice that there's ice on the steps? Hey, when you're swinging that tennis racket or that stick around, be aware that your friends are standing close by. When you jump off the couch, be aware that the dog is there. Don't land on him, rather than, oh, be careful. Be careful of what, So those kinds of things, to go back to what you were saying about just little throwaway comments. There are some that are throwaway comments that just get lodged in there, and you can remember with great detail the specificity of that instant in time. I think this is just pure conjecture on my part, but I think that those things stick because they're like associated with thousands and thousands of other things that sort of carry the same meaning, not the same intention behind them, but the same meaning as we start to learn how language works and how emotions and intentions are connected to words. I hope all that made sense. I feel like I went on a ramble there.
That's perfectly fine. I've just realized as you were talking there, James isn't in charge of this one. It's me. And I could go on forever about this stuff. This was the wrong podcast for me to, this was the wrong episode for me to introduce. Because honestly, I could talk about this for, when I could talk about this for hours, I could talk about this for days. Because I've been looking into this stuff for so long. Or it feels like it's so long that everything you're saying resonates. And I love it. I absolutely love it. But, and we'll have to have you back on, obviously, because you've got to try and beat Dan John to who's been on the most, because he's been on 5 times and you've been on 3, so you're getting there. But,
is it like Saturday Night Live that after 5 we get a jacket?
Yeah, you get a gilet. I'll give you a gilet.
Or you come back on as like a guest host. You come back on as a guest host.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. You do a monologue you can do the monologue before we come on. But yeah, no, honestly, I don't want to have to stop you there, Dave. But I think like we've been going for like an hour and 20 minutes or something like that.
Oh yeah,
and we could go for another hour and 20 minutes easily. But yeah. So honestly, I've got so much going around in my head. I've got so much written down as well. Yeah. How do we usually do this?
I suppose the next thing for today is the program that Dave's got coming up, isn't it? And it's how people find out more about it and all the rest of it, isn't it? Not doing your job, Pete. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's all right. My head's full of stuff now that I'm forgetting how.
I usually mess up the beginning. He messes up the end.
So yes, Dave, this new program of yours, this project, the Advancing Man project, how do people find you and get in touch with you about it? Who are you looking for, and how do the people get in touch with you about it?
Well, conveniently enough, there is advancingmanproject.com.
Well, it's all you've thought of this, haven't you?
Yes. It's almost like there's a plan. And I will say this, a couple of days ago, I was working on some of the stuff on that site, and I sent it to someone to kind of look over it, and they didn't put the 3 W's on the front, and it didn't take them to the site, but then they went and put the W's and it did. So if you just type in advancingmanproject.com and it doesn't take you to if it takes you to a GoDaddy page where it says this domain is parked, just throw the W's on there and it'll take you where you need to go. Having said that, the Advancing Man Project is the thing that I'm working on now that we've been talking about. It is specifically for health and fitness aware, money aware men who are fathers, probably of young kids under 10 or so. If we're going to get really specific about dialing it in, and it's not exclusive to that, but those are if that's you, it's for you. If you see yourself becoming your upbringing against your will, if you are having an interaction with your kid and it goes unpleasantly, and you like, that sounded like what my dad used to say to me. Oh my God, I'm turning into my parents. It doesn't have to be that way. I know this from experience, not just with myself, but from people that I've worked with. And so next, well, I say next Tuesday, but
this is going out on the 20th.
Okay, this goes out on 20th.
January.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so on the 21st 4th of January, which is a Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, my time. I'm not sure what time that is in the UK. I think it might be like 10 p.m. for you guys. I'm not 100%.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm doing an online workshop where we're going to go into much more detail about all of the steps that go along with this and how the framework actually works. You go to advancingmanproject.com and you can register for it. For my friends that are in other places that can't attend to it live, it will most likely be a replay if I can figure out that technology in time myself. But it's going to be a live Zoom thing, and I welcome you to be on it. It'll be interactive. There'll be question and answers. I'm going to go more deeply into how the framework works, about how to get more clarity around what you actually want to do and who you want to be, the process that we use to break and replace those generational cycles of unwanted beliefs and limited thinking, and how to actually take that, put it into practice so that you can become an advancing man. And to that point, it's much like, okay, I learned a lot about how to eat and how to lift and how to be healthy, and I went to the gym twice and I ate 3 salads. I'm done. Doesn't work that way, right? It's a daily practice. If you want to change things fundamentally, you have to change fundamentally. So this will shine a big light on the areas that you feel like you're falling down. This will help you develop the relationship where you become the hero, the role model that your kids are looking for, and you become the father that they need. And you do that by becoming the man that embodies those characteristics and those qualities. So it's win-win all the way around. You will enjoy your life better. Your kids will turn out better and won't be, doomed to the generational curses. And the biggest thing is the relationship that you have with your children will be so much more fulfilling, and so much more, the bond will be so much stronger, because you know that every single time you go to interact with them, you're guided by the idea of, I want them to be better off than they were before this interaction. And we'll get into some of the specifics about how to do that, because like I said earlier, it sounds really simple, and it is simple, but it can get kind of complicated. I'm sitting here had a cup of coffee. I'm feeling good. It's the beginning of the day for me. Everything's great. So it'd be very easy for me to interact in a very positive way right now. If it's where, he was up in the middle of the night because he wasn't feeling well, I didn't get enough sleep, and, something happened with my wife and she has to go, it's like just the stress of life comes in on us, and I'm not in a great mood. Can I still show up for him? Not shoving that aside, but saying, okay, this is where I am. I'm going to model for him what it looks like to be in a suboptimal place emotionally and still thrive and still advance and still be kind and still be strong. So advancingmanproject.com. We're going to talk about all that stuff.
That is fantastic. I've got one more question to ask you, but I'm going to do it at the very end.
Okay.
But Dave, honestly, this might be my favorite episode, because and I'll happily say that. Are you meant to say that on these things? I don't know.
Aren't our favorite children, Peter?
I've got any children.
Go wrong.
I've got a favorite dog, but I've only got one of those, you see. So no, honestly, Dave, I think this has been an amazing episode. And it's going to be a one to listen to more than once for people, I think. And I would encourage that, because this is hugely powerful stuff. Hugely powerful. So thank you for coming on. James, have you got any closing statements, thoughts?
No, just to say, really always enjoyed talking to Dave and having him on the podcast, and it was lovely to catch up again. And this in particular, as a kind of a dad to 2 kids, 6 and 3 myself. It's there's so much to think about with regards to all of this. And just for our listeners in the UK, we were talking before we started recording, Dave's mentioned it a couple of times, The Incredible Hulk, the older Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby original pilot movie that kicked it all off for Dave when he was a kid, is now on Netflix in the UK. So go and have a watch of that. I'm going to watch that again because that had a big impact on my childhood as well. So have a watch of that. And go to the advancingmanproject.com and find out about that. I'll be doing that myself. So
Yeah, I'm on it already. Don't worry.
Yeah, you're on it already. Okay. Brilliant.
Paul,
Thank you, Dave. No, it was great.
Paul,
Thank you so much for having me on.
I watched Dead Poet Society again recently. And in
Ooh.
the spirit of that, the fact is that I was talking to one of my trainers today, and we were just talking about parenthood. And I remembered a phrase, and I actually texted it to her from, I don't know if any of you have read The Prophet by Grant. There's a great section on there on children. And obviously this prophet comes into a town, and the locals start asking the prophet about his thoughts on variety of subjects. And this one, I thought I'd just read a passage from it, because I thought it's just kind of, for me, it just kind of reflects a lot of those things we talk about with parenthood. So it says, speak to us of children. And he said, your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, he also loves the bow that is stable. So I thought that's something that me and one of my trainers were talking about today, because she had some things that she wanted to talk about. And it just reminded me, I remember reading that book, and it was a very interesting book. I know a lot of people have read it, and it's almost a cliche now, but it's I think it's beautifully written.
No.
That is a truly beautiful quote, and I appreciate you sharing that. And the thing about cliches is they become cliches because they enter into circulation, and what makes it a cliche is hearing it so often that we don't think about its value anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was an incredibly valuable thing that you just said, and I loved it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's right.
Excellent. Right, I've got a little closing thing, but I've got 3 quotes written down, and I'm only going to say one of them, because I wrote them down ages ago now during this conversation. But the one, and this is from Brian Grasser, who I don't know if you know him, David.
I know Brian.
You've commented on his stuff, but I'm in I'm in his program.
Okay.
Like mindset stuff and things for business. And one of his quotes, I think it's his, but I saw it on his page, was, I was born looking like my parents, and I'm going to die looking like my choices. I think I've said that on here before. And I just think that is brilliant, because that is what that kind of runs through everything we've been talking about today. Is like the choice you make today. You know, you said it earlier, you determine who you're going to be or who you want to be. And then you decide what the choices that person would make.
Mm-hmm.
And you start doing that now daily, and then you get to be that person, which is brilliant.
Yep.
And speaking of choices, will you be going to see Pantera on their tribute tour? It's not a reunion, is it? But,
it's not a reunion. No.
No.
It is not a reunion. I will tell you this. When I first found out that that's what they were talking about doing, I was as giddy as a schoolgirl, right?
Yeah.
Because
I knew you would be.
I saw Pantera every year. A couple times I saw them twice in the same year, from 91 until 98. I saw them at least 8 or 9 times. And during that period of my life, they were my favorite band. You were talking earlier about being able to talk for days about something. I could literally talk for days about Pantera, and about Dime, and about Vinny, and about the legacy, and about the tragedy, and particularly about the relationship and the parallels with Van Halen. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Edward Van Halen put the Bumblebee guitar in Dime's casket, and all of that stuff. Also, I'm a huge fan of Zakk Wylde and all the work that he's done with Black Label Society with Ozzy. I saw him on the Pride and Glory tour when he was figuring out what to do. Like, I'm not an Ozzy, Ozzy doesn't define what I do, and I haven't quite evolved into the Viking biker guy. So I'm doing this, so been a fan of his since day one. And so, and Charlie Benante is just one of the most fantastic drummers ever. So when they announced that that's what they were doing, I'm like, those are literally the only two people that could pull this off.
Yep.
Right. And so what are the expectations? Because the last time I saw Phil sing, he was kind of rough, and talk about living your choices. He's made some choices that he managed to survive and he's learned from. But, 15 years ago, you're like, this guy's not going to be around. If you would have told me in 1993 that Dime would have been the first one of those guys to die, not Phil, I would have not believed it. Right. So when it happened and they played those shows in South America or Chile or wherever they were, it pops up on YouTube. I'm watching it, and just really crappy cell phone recordings. I'm like, oh my God, they're doing it. They're pulling it off.
Yeah.
Is it Pantera? That's up to them to decide. To me, it's not Pantera, because there is no Pantera without Vinny and Dime, just like there's no Van Halen without Ed and Alex. But is it Pantera as close as it can get with the two guys that I believe that the deceased members would have handpicked to fill in? Yes. Did they deliver the Pantera experience based on me having been there live, watching it on YouTube? Absolutely. So the short version of an answer that's already gone on way too long, if they come around here close, like within a 3-hour drive of me, I will be there.
Yeah. If they do a UK tour, I'm going to go, because I saw them in 94, I think, just after Far Beyond Driven had come out. And that was at an all-seater venue in Newcastle, where I grew up. An all-seater venue, right? A Victorian, it might have even been a Georgian theatre. So an old theatre, basically. They were on stage. Somebody had ripped a chair. That was when Big Val was their security guy. Someone had ripped a chair out and threw it on the stage. It came in from the crowd and landed on the stage. And then they cut the PA. And then they came back on and started again. And then it got a bit rowdy and they cut the PA, and the concert was cancelled. So that's the only time I ever saw them. I saw them for about 40 minutes. And then the gig was cancelled, and that was it. And we all got our £10 back, because that's how much it was at the time. It was the best thing I've ever been to. And it was the gig that didn't happen. And it was amazing. It was exactly how it should have gone.
I saw Megadeth that year. That was my I met
Brilliant,
Dave
man.
Mustaine as well.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Dave Mustaine is a neighbor of mine. He lives about 15 minutes from me.
Is he a nice guy?
Are you around his house all the time, like knocking on the door? Dave, can I come in?
I've met him 3 different times. Because and this is a long story. So I'll condense it. Most of my stories are longer. The way that I met him the first time was I had a friend that I knew through strength work, who worked for a company that makes guitar strings, and Mustaine was one of their endorsed artists. And 2 times a year, they have what's called the National Association of Music Merchants show, the NAMM show. Summer's in Nashville and winter is in Los Angeles. So my friend lives in LA. He's coming to Summer NAMM show. He says, hey, do you want to get in? And I'm like, sure, I'd love to go to NAMM. I always wanted to, because, I was a guitar player for a long time. And so they made a laminate. I was an endorsed artist, all of that kind of stuff. So I could show up and get the VIP thing there. And so after hanging out with them, and I showed up at 11 in the morning, they were already drunk. It was that kind of thing, right? So after hanging out with them all day, they're like, hey, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, I don't really have any plans. It's good. We're going to go have sushi with Musty Dave. Musty Dave? Yeah, Mustaine. I have to go do this thing to take care of him because he's one of our artists. So I went and had dinner with Dave Mustaine, and his wife and daughter and a couple of guys that were from this string company. Sat next to Dave, had conversations with him, and he was awesome. I'd heard stories about him and all that, but I also know that, and this actually relates back to what we were talking about earlier with parents, and people were bringing this up. Everyone is doing things the best they know how to do it at any given moment. And all of those stories of him being a diva or being difficult or whatever, if you look at that, if you graft that out, it's happening along with the worst elements of his addictions. right? So he's coked up, he's on heroin, he's drinking a fifth of whiskey a day, and he's being a dick. Imagine that, right? And so to reference that back to something I forgot to say earlier, is one of the huge parts for me for being able to do this advancing man stuff is realizing my parents did everything they did from a place of love, acting the best way that they knew how to act. And so that's why I'm able to not chase down that guy that drove off in the truck and pull him out of the truck and shake him and ask him what's going on. I understand that as a human being, he's operating with faulty information and he's doing the best that he knows how to do in the moment. So anyway, to go back to Mustaine, he was absolutely lovely. I saw him 2 more times after that. I bent a wrench for him because I knew he was going to be there. Bent a wrench for him and gave it to him. So that kind of stuck in his mind. Saw him on a plane once and talked to him. I was like, hey, Dave. And he's like, hey, buddy, with that kind of like standoffish thing. And I'm like, no, I'm not some dude. We've met before. And I know Joe. And it's okay. So we like hung out and talked for a few minutes there. And then I saw him again, him and his wife at the farmer's market. near where we both live, and he's there buying like corn on the cob or whatever. So but that was just like a hey Dave, how's it going thing. But yeah, he was a lovely guy, and whatever stories I've heard about him that were unpleasant, he didn't exhibit any of that toward me.
Oh man, right. Anyway,
that's like an extra 20-minute music podcast at the end.
Yeah, there's just a little bit on the end. That's because I'm branching out. I've grown the beard. I told my girlfriend Sean when I started growing this, right? I showed her a picture of Dimebag and I went, that's what I'm aiming at. And she was like, no chance. But it's
diet
getting
pink,
there. Hey, it's getting there, I'll tell you. I'm not going to diet pink though. Anyway, Dave, honestly, thank you so much for that. I've had a great time. Yeah, thanks for listening.
If you have more questions like that, we should probably like stop recording and
yeah, don't worry. I'm going to wrap up now. But thanks for listening. Honestly, we appreciate you all of your support. Thank you again to Dave for coming on. Honestly, this has been a great episode. And if you like it, please like, share. If you think this will impact any of your friends or family or anything like that, please forward it on. Leave a review. Let's get the message out there. And also don't forget the Advancing Man Project website. Share that with your friends as well. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.